to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, and we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up, here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this indeed is my show. So guys, look, I know everyone's excited about the football tonight. I know England's playing, but they're not playing yet. I've at least got, I believe I've got until 8 until I kick off. So we've got an hour. Just stick with me. You can switch over as soon as the match starts. But until then, please stick with me and my guest tonight. You may know him from such films as Children of the Corn, The Burbs. You might know him from working on such TV shows as ER and Seinfeld. You may know some of the actors he's worked with, such as, Tom Hanks and George Clooney. But I can call an image of him to mind very easily with just 5 words. And that's quite convenient because his video is not working at the moment. But all I have to say to you is, hey, McFly, I'm cutting in. And you will instantly know I'm going to be speaking with Courtney Gains. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, sir.
You there?
Not so bad. How are you doing? Other than awful weather, it sounds like, which has knocked out your video.
Yeah, we've had bad rains here, and my Wi-Fi on my computer's out, so I'm doing it on the phone, and it's for some reason it won't give me a video as well. So we just have audio. We'll have to make it work with what we got, eh?
No problem. Luckily, I swear I didn't anyone who's watching this, who's watched the show before, will know I'm not slick enough to have prepared that intro knowing that your video wasn't going to work. But it's a kind of a happy accident right there.
There you go. There you go.
One thing which I was absolutely fascinated at, actually, no, let's not put horse before cart. Let's start off with this. So as well as your amazing acting career, you've also got a music career, and you're celebrating 30 years in the business, as well as over 130 credits, is it, on IMDb? That's
correct, yeah.
So was it the music or the acting which drew you in first, and how did you get going on it all?
I knew about wanting to be an actor probably by the age I was 10. So I guess that was first. I started taking lessons in music and in acting at the same age, around 13 years old. But the acting, of course, is the one that took off and had more support, managers and agents and all those things. But music's always been there on the side. And I've done a few, put out a few records here and there, but recently I just decided I'm not, going to get a record deal probably. So it's just, there's so many things you can do independently now. So I've got 2 projects going. One is a band called Ripple Street. We're putting out our second EP right now. Our single we just put out is called Would You? And it's very Black Sabbath-esque kind of heavy stuff. And I also have a solo record I'm putting out called Acoustic Gains. And our second single called Cherish is coming out tomorrow. And it's much more mellow, very acoustic driven stuff. So that's what's going on with the music. But yeah, they made my living as an actor, which is I love them both. So but they're very different to me. One's way more, music's a little more personal. Acting is you're taking somebody else's words and bringing it to life, right?
Before we go into the acting side of it, you've just dropped that you've got the music coming out. Where can people listen to that?
You can get it. You can check me out on Courtney Gains on Spotify. And again, the record's called Acoustic Gains. And Ripple Street, you can also check out Spotify. And then all of them are available on, Apple, iTunes, Deezer, all of that for purchase.
Brilliant. And Children of the Corn was one of your first film projects. Is this correct?
That was the first, yeah.
The first. I mean, what was it like stepping into that? We all know what a classic it is now, but I can imagine it's one of those ones which in the script you have to have the vision to see it. How did it kind of first strike you when you looked into that?
Well, so Linda Francis, the casting director, was one of the first people to take a shine to my work, and she had tried to get me matter of fact, I'd been cast in another movie that she had done that then ended up getting canceled for some reason. So she was the person that was championing me to get work and break into the business. So I owe a lot to her. But I started to go in and audition, and I'd been studying in a professional adult workshop for for 5 years, and everybody kept saying, you know, when you turn 18, you're going to start working, because back then there was emancipation laws where if you were underage, you couldn't work a full 8-hour day. So as teen cinema was blowing up, the idea of being 18 and looking younger was a huge advantage. And then to have 5 years of really good training by a professional working actor was also a guy named Virgil Fry, was also a big advantage. And you know, I was hungry. A lot of people in the class had already been breaking out and working, and I really felt like you know, I could do it, and I wanted to prove I could do it. So I came into that audition with a big chip on my shoulder, and it was a role I could sink my teeth into. Anger was, and intensity was something I could definitely get to emotionally, and so I was definitely fired up to get that role, and I did so.
It's one of those ones which is like, you know, just a lot of the action, obviously, as the title might suggest, is set in the corn. Was it just long days out in the cornfields, or is it more kind of set up than we might imagine from the film?
Well, there was the cornfield. The first thing, their first challenge was to find good corn. Normally, Nebraska is where the corn is in the Midwest in America. But for some reason that year, I don't know if they'd had a frost or something, so it wasn't that good. So it ended up being in Iowa that they were able to find a good cornfield to use. And then there was these really small towns as well. Like this one town we shot in, the main town was a town called Whiting. I think they had a high school graduating class of like 16 kids. That's how small it was. So coming from Los Angeles, having grown up in Los Angeles, it was definitely a bit of a culture shock to go to small town Iowa, but in a good way, you know, in a really good way. People were much less precocious. You know, LA is is full of it's a lot of looking good going on in LA. You know, everybody's got to have a nice car, and everybody's talking themselves up. And in Iowa, you know, everybody's wearing t-shirts and jeans. You know, it's very laid back.
And was it like, you know, because back then the other thing is we like now hear from actors complaining about long days on set and, oh God, they've got to wait for stuff to get set up. Then we did not have our iPods. Then we did not have all the kind of myriad of ways to entertain ourselves. What was it like on the long days filming something like that when you didn't have those things? Like, what was the set like?
Well, you're right. I mean, it is, but we didn't know better, right? So we didn't have anything to compare it to. You know, you find ways to entertain yourself. I often bring a guitar to set, which I'm sure I did. So I played a lot of guitar. I always felt like my chops would get better when I was on movies, because I would just sit in my trailer and play guitar, waiting for them to call me in, you know. But I don't remember feeling like the days were long. It was my first film, but I felt like I was working. When I was on set, I was working. So when you're working, it doesn't feel bad. It's when you're waiting around to work. Like the worst is if you get called in at like 6 a.m. because the typical times of shooting are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. if you're shooting nights, right? You basically shoot till dawn.
Yeah.
If you get called in at like 6 a.m. to work and then you don't work till like 5 p.m., that's annoying. Like, you hate when they do that to you. You just sit around 10, 11 hours doing nothing. Sometimes you're there all day and they come and say, sorry, we're not going to use you today. So you've been there 10, 11, almost 12 hours and you didn't work. That's when it sucks.
The other, like, I'm just going to kind of skip ahead in your credits, but there's one, I love an interestingly named credit, which I've never heard of. And not only is it a great name of the film, but your name of your character in this, it's Lost in the Dust, and you're a Red Dick Barker. Tell us a bit about that.
It's funny. I was just talking in my last interview about Lust in the Dust. They're saying movies that people hadn't seen that you might think were good. And that was one I cited, Lust in the Dust. It was a film with Divine and Tab Hunter, Cesar Romero, Lainey Kazan, Jeffrey Lewis, all these amazing veteran actors. It was my third film. And it was funny. The casting directors, I didn't really know much about Divine. I'd heard of Polyester, but I was a young guy. I didn't know anything. And they were just like, if you have any problems, the first assistant director's straight. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And then the first day I got on set, I saw Divine, dressed in the full-on drag, sitting in a back of a truck looking like she's supposed to be on a horse with a whip going, yeah. And I thought, what have I gotten myself into here? But Divine was absolutely great to work with, total pro, and getting to watch. I stayed another 2 weeks. We shot it in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a beautiful area that I'd never been to, and but I stayed another 2 weeks just to watch all these veteran actors work, because I mean, Cesar Romero was, the Joker and Batman, and I was a huge fan, and to get to watch these veterans work for me, it's like I said, it's my third film. I learned a lot.
Wow, look, I must admit, I wasn't expecting a Cesar Romero story out. That will do very nicely, sir.
Yeah.
You just see some of these credits. I love the title "Lust in the Dust." Like, that could be anything.
Yes, it's very funny Western comedy. Very funny. It's definitely worth a watch, especially if you're Divine. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that one out. I have to, of course. I would not be a child of the '80s if I didn't ask about Back to the Future. Now, just to even kind of get a kind of small part in a film like that, what's it like stepping into that set and stepping into that world just for a few days?
Well, so it's an interesting story. So the first thing that made it easier, I didn't know how big the movie was going to be. No one knew who Robert Zemeckis was really as a director yet. We knew Spielberg was involved, but that's all we knew. Crispin Glover and I the first thing I ever did was a movie for the American Film Institute. It's now out. It's called the Beaver Trilogy, because they've made this same movie 3 times. One time with Sean Penn and one time with Crispin Glover. I have to tell this story because it's just so crazy. So the first thing I ever did, I come in and the guy's like, "Okay, so you're just smoking in the boys' room. Let's rehearse." And then the bathroom stall opens, and it's Crispin Glover dressed in that black outfit that Olivia Newton-John wore, and right, with the wig and everything. And it's Crispin Glover. He's like, "Hey guys, how's it going?" And I'm just like, "This is insane, but this actor is amazing. Who is this?" Right? So we hit it off, and so to go onto that set, to actually know one of the lead actors, and he came right to my trailer and said hello and stuff, made it much easier. It's always nice when you know somebody. So in that way, I felt, hey, I'm working with a guy I've worked with before, and we're going to be good. But the most interesting thing that happened was, so the story is, Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty. And they after like 5 weeks in, they let him go and brought in Michael J. Fox and completely reshot the movie. So
yeah, it was totally unheard of. They'd filmed kind of quite a good chunk of the movie, but they had this agreement that they'd bring in Michael J. Fox if it didn't work.
Over a third of it, yeah. So it was a big deal. And so legally, how it works with an actor is they have a thing called a drop pickup. So if you work and then you're not going to work for a week, instead of having to pay you for every day, they can drop pick you up and then pick you up again at the end of the week. Now, they can only do that once, and they had already done that with me when that whole thing happened. So I ended up getting paid for another 5 weeks while they reshot everything. When they figured it out, they flipped a lid, but there's really nothing they could do about it. So for a role that I was probably supposed to do 3, 4, or 5 days on over a period of time, I ended up getting paid for like 5-6 weeks. And obviously it's gone on to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest trilogy of all time. And it plays on TV constantly still to this day. So, I get residual checks for all of that. So it's been one of the big blessings of my career, to be honest.
And what a fantastic kind of role to have. You're basically the second baddie. You're the guy who kind of tries to steal lane from our hero George back in the past.
That's true. It is, for a little role, it does have a big impact. It is an important moment in the film for him to kiss his wife to be. So yeah, it has, if you have a small role but it's in a place of importance, it certainly can be memorable.
Yeah, like all I have to hear is, "Hey McFly, I'm coming in," and I'm picturing your face. Like that's for a lot of people of my generation.
And people do use that quote, which is amazing. I'm sure there's plenty of other quotes from that movie that are used, but when I sign conventions and things, that's of course what they want me to sign on the photos. So yeah, it's amazing when even something small, they'll remember a quote. If the quote's good and you do a good job with it, they'll remember it.
Do you still get stopped in the street for that?
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm just quite in awe of that, but we will move on. So 21 Jump Street as well, you pop up in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
TV show.
that was shot up in Vancouver. That was when Canada started doing the tax incentives, where they gave money back per dollar, 30 cents per dollar. So much was being shot up in Vancouver. I remember we went to the hotel and I saw more actors in that hotel than I would see in LA. It was like so much production was being done up there. But yeah, that was a good experience. First time I'd ever been to Vancouver. It's a lovely city. And getting to work with Johnny Depp before he became huge. Cool dude. Very cool dude. And Peter DeLuise, who was the other lead in it, I'd done a movie with before that called Winners Take All. So again, always nice to know somebody on set. Matter of fact, I think I stayed a few more days and stayed at his place because I thought Vancouver was a really nice city, so I wanted to check it out for a while.
And I think the DeLuises get kind of forgotten in the acting legacies of Hollywood. They
absolutely. Yeah, he comes from Hollywood royalty, as it were, with his father, and he's gone on to become a director. He mainly directs in Canada, but I worked for him once on what was that show? I'll think of it in a minute. It was a detective show. Played like a couple long-haired computer hacker nerd types of guys, and he directed us in that. So what was that show called? It'll come to me. But yes,
this is the problem.
Be a director, and the actor I worked with, Dan Bell, in it's gone on to become a huge commercial casting director in Los Angeles. You just never know where people end up 20, 30 years later.
I mean, this is the problem where you've done like 1 million credits. Like you've forgotten more TV shows than most actors could hope to be in.
Yeah, maybe it's true. Sometimes I forget things. It'll come to me. But yeah, 6 Degrees of Separation, right? I think they talk about 6 Degrees of Separation with Kevin Bacon. I think you could do a pretty good job of doing that with me as well.
Yeah, it's true enough. It's true enough. I mean, I never thought that I would have one, let alone two of the cast of Hell Kitty on my show.
Who was
and I've had Bill O'Burst Jr. on before.
Ah, yes, and he and I did another movie called Death Camp. He does a lot of horror. But yeah, so I know him. I know him a little bit and see him at conventions.
If there was anyone like, I'd have to look far and wide to meet someone who's done more acting jobs than you, but Bill's like got over 200.
Yeah, no, he works constantly.
Crazy. Like, and actually the one of the people who crops up in Hell Kitty as well is Doug Jones, who was another one of these kind of actors, and now very big for Star Trek, of course, in Discovery, but he made his kind of bread and butter doing all those kind of horror films.
Well, Hellraiser, yeah, he's Pinhead in Hellraiser. So, yeah, no, I know him a bit. My manager we'd also do conventions, and Doug is one of the. There's several people in that Hell's Kitty that are clients of my managers. That's how I and John Franklin got on that project. A couple of the others had done it before, Adrian Barbeau, and he'd gotten good feedback and said, "Hey, I think you guys should do this." And when I first read it, there wasn't a lot that my character did. It was mainly John's character, and I was just like, well, I think he has, if you make him a little more resistant. I mean, Malachi is not an agreeable person, and I said, maybe I don't know, I do music. Maybe let me write a song. And he's like, okay, well, let me hear it. And so I wrote this song called "I Hate Cats," and that made it. So he beefed up my role, and I said, okay, so we did it, and it was fun. Nice, and
a good opportunity to get your music in there.
Yeah, if I can find a way, I do. If it's appropriate,
I love actors.
It's always fun to see if you can write a song too. Like, so it's not just like some song I wrote that fits, but from the point of view of sort of Malachi and this whole premise of Hell Kitty is this possessed cat or whatever, and him writing, he picks up a guitar at this guy's house and just starts playing the song called "I Hate Cats." That was kind of, it came out pretty funny. So.
See, this is what a good actor does. You take every part of the beast to put into your performance that you can.
Yeah, if you come up with an idea that works, like I said, I felt the character just needed to be beefed up a little bit. If you're going to bring, Malachi back in some way, I don't think he should be passive, because that's not what he was. So.
Another one which I just want to pick up on, just because I'm a lover of all things superheroes. So you popped up in an episode of Superboy.
Oh my God, Superboy. Yeah, no one ever talks about that.
Oh, please.
I got to shoot that in Orlando, Florida, which is where Disney World is, and that was the biggest perk is I got to get a VIP tour of Disney World. So I got to go through Disney World in like an hour and a half. I just got to cut through all the lines and do all the rides. So that was a nice VIP perk. But that was not it was a pretty low quality show as it were, and I didn't think anyone would probably see it. I was shooting the Burbs at the time, and I was in between again a drop pickup of when I was going to have to go back. So I got offered it, and I'm like, sure, I'll go do it. And I thought, oh, nobody will see this. And then I remember when I got back to work on the Burbs, the first thing I heard was Tom Hanks going, "Hey, I saw you on Superboy with my kids." And then Joe Dante, the director, "Hey, I saw you on Superboy." So you just never know who's watching. That's what I learned.
Oh, and look, since you brought it up, I was going to go there. The Burbs, one of the funniest films of the 80s, and Tom Hanks when he's at his height of his comedy genius. Like, not that he hasn't gone to maybe a thing or two since then, but like that for me was where most of us kind of discover Hank, was in these fantastic, funny comedies of the 80s. What was it like to be there with that guy at that time?
Well, so yeah, that is when he was doing comedy. You're right; he doesn't do much comedy anymore. He's one of the few guys to go from being a big comedy star to making a transition into drama, which I think has really elongated his career. So the thing about that movie that was interesting that I didn't completely appreciate at the time is there was a writer's strike in Hollywood at that time, and there was no work. But I had been just working consistently, so I just sort of took it for granted that there was work. Now that I'm older, I realize how lucky I was. It was literally us and Fletch 2 were the only two projects being shot on the entire Universal lot.
Wow.
It was like a ghost town, right? And we shot nothing but nights, and we shot in this famous cul-de-sac on the Universal Studios tours. They give that they talk about it. That's where the Munsters was shot, Desperate Housewives was shot. Like, so many things have been shot on this cul-de-sac. So I'm proud to be one of the projects that's part of that Universal history. But yeah, we shot nothing but nights, and we shot in Los Angeles, and that really made it difficult because you would get calls and get woke up and try to do things. And as opposed to if you were on location in a hotel, you would just sleep in the day and work at night, So I always say that's like about 2 months sleep that I never got back in my life.
Well, I mean, my good buddy Matt Lees was reminding me, who, by the way, does a wonderful theme tune here on the Dr. Squee Show. So thank you very much for that, Matt. He was reminding me of that wonderful scene near the end where Bruce Dern's just chasing you across the lawn. One of the funniest scenes.
Well, yeah, one of the funniest lines, right? "Hey, Pinocchio, where are you going?" Which that is also something I sign in my convention things, depending on. There's basically there's two Burbs camps. "Hey, Pinocchio, where are you going?" and "Sardines." I don't know what it means about an individual, but those are the two lines that are the ones that people gravitate toward. But yeah, so back to what was it like to work with Tom Hanks? Tom Hanks is the most grounded A-list actor you're ever going to meet. He's a guy who has been able to keep it real, as they say. He's very Americana. He would like to sit there in his chair on the set, listening, smoking a stogie, listening to the radio of a baseball game. That's Tom Hanks, and just a really accessible and nice guy. And then you just talked about Bruce Dern, and Bruce Dern, the first scene that we did where I come out to the mailbox and stuff and get all scared sort of by them looking all that. I mean, he right from that point on, he came up to me and sort of took me under his wing and just really acknowledged the work I was doing. And I was a big Bruce Dern fan and still am. And so that meant a lot to me. And he gave me some really, really excellent advice, business wise and career wise. And I wish I had been smart enough to keep him as a mentor through my career and got more advice, but I didn't. But recently I did a movie called Hellblazers for a director named Justin Lee. It was like the third project I've done for him. And when I heard Bruce Dern was going to be on it, I jumped on it because I wanted to get a chance to see him again and thank him for for taking the time, to help this young actor who was trying to figure out what he was doing. So, and he's so smart, so quick-witted, that guy. Such a good actor.
We've actually got a question from Mr. Lees himself. I invoked him, obviously, by mentioning his name there. He's put, was the slip in the final scene planned or genuine when you both went flying?
Oh, the slip was planned, and the actual slip you see of me is actually a stunt guy, which it's kind of funny, but just a big budget movie. They're careful. I've done so many worse and crazier things in my career than taking that fall, but that was actually a stunt guy, and the guy that he get tackled was a stunt guy. But yeah, it was totally planned.
I've got to say though, sir, I mean, like, to go into a film with Bruce Dern and with Mr. Tom Hanks, and to kind of give a performance that people remember so fondly of yours there, that's no mean feat, sir.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. And don't forget, I got to work with, Carrie Fisher as well. I've worked with, I've worked with her, and I've also, I'm trying to think, I could do the trifecta of Star Wars. I've worked with him, and who's the lead guy? Mark Hamill. I've worked with Mark Hamill.
Okay.
That's I just need one more to do the trifecta of Star Wars. That's my goal.
I like it. So, like, is there kind of a moment where you have to kind of center yourself to stop yourself from getting starstruck when you're in the presence of these kind of these icons? Even back then, like Tom Hanks was particularly well known, and Bruce Dern.
Well, not only that when we were shooting that movie is when Big came out. So that was when he went from star to superstar. You know what I mean? That was like, it went a whole nother notch, a whole nother level after Big came out. Big was just a huge movie at that time. So that was interesting to sort of watch that happen and see him, sort of contemplating that, dealing with that, but he handled it with total grace. In that particular movie, it was a challenge because my character was supposed to be, this foreign guy from somewhere Slavic European and didn't know anybody, and everywhere I looked was someone that I was in my childhood. You know what I mean? People I grew up with in my teenagehood. So I had to really shake that off. I'm like, I'm looking at Carrie Fisher. No, I'm not looking at Carrie. I'm looking at Tom Hanks. No, I'm looking at Bruce Dern. No, I'm not looking at Bruce Dern. And including Henry Gibbons, who played the lead bad guy in our project. I mean, Henry Gibbons, been on everything from Laugh-In to the Blues Brothers. I mean, I literally grew up watching him. So, and he was a sweetheart, great guy. But yeah, so it was, there was many people on that movie that were just established,
You raise a good point. Usually on some cast, you could at least look away from kind of the most famous guy on set to someone else, but everyone on that set was the most famous guy or guy.
Yeah, they were all recognizable, that's for sure. All like I said, all people I had seen before I ever, was working professionally myself.
Brilliant. Next one, like I want to talk about, it's another one of these ones we mentioned Back to the Future before, obviously kind of those wonderful period sets which you get for the 50s. Memphis Belle, another kind of great period piece.
Oh yeah, and I really do love doing period pieces, and I certainly like doing war projects. I've been fortunate to do Civil War movies. I've also done westerns, and I love that. It's so yeah. Memphis Belle, I mean, is probably the biggest, the classiest project I've ever was involved in, and all the other actors, when I run into them, we all say the same, that we've been chasing that movie or that experience again. It's pretty much the biggest experience any of us had. We shot it in the UK first off, so and we got to shoot at famous Pinewood Studios, so that was an amazing thing. And 5 of the major crew were Oscar award-winning people. Stuart Craig for set dressing, who are our production design, who's pretty much every big movie I see out of the UK still has his name on it. I mean, he's one of the biggest production designers, ever. And David Watkins was the DP who had won an Oscar for Out of Africa. And then David Putnam himself is a producer for Chariots of Fire, and so it's just like just top notch people, and this the Memphis Belle itself was made in 5 pieces that could connect together. That was so well done that it ended up being put in a museum. I mean, we got to actually fly in a B-17 on 4th of July, ironically, which was rather interesting because
Wow.
it wasn't being celebrated in the UK, obviously. So that was interesting.
Yeah, 4th of July or Tuesdays, it's known around these parts. But I get it. It's a big,
Yes.
big thing for you guys.
Yes. So that was interesting, though, to be in another country. Like, wow, this doesn't exist here, does it? But to then get to go up in a B-17 on that day is an unforgettable experience, you know, an amazing experience. But yeah, just everything about that movie was just top notch. And then to be, you know, loosely playing real people as well. The character that I loosely played, his real name is Kashmir Nastal. He's no longer with us, but we all got to, you know, talk to them on the phones and everything before we did it. And then they flew, I think it was 8 out of 9 or 8 out of 10 flew out and to meet us all. And we had a party in their honor. And, you know, Harry Connick gets on piano and they're dancing with their wives. And, you know, it was just bigger than a movie. And there was something about those guys getting together. You could see it, you know, either they were, you know, old men at this point, but they had a sparkle in their eye when they got together because they literally beat the Jaws to death, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
I just,
it was the average is four runs and you get knocked out of the sky. And these guys did 25. I think they even went further than that. And my particular character, him and his brother both went in underage. They had lost their parents and their sister vouched for him. One went in at 16 and one went in at 17. One flew 50 missions and the other flew 55. I don't think there's a thing about it in the Guinness Book of Records, but I bet it's the record. I bet for two brothers, 105 missions, I bet has to be the record. Those guys were blessed. I mean, the odds of them surviving is like 1,000,000 to 1.
I just can't imagine like the congruence of like amazing things in that moment. So you're surrounded by these people who are the real deal. Like they've done what you grew up pretending to do on the playground, kind of like pretending to be a fighter pilot. You've got Harry Connick Jr., for God's sakes, again at the pinnacle of his original kind of thing.
He was relatively unknown at that point. While he was doing that movie, he was talking about, yeah, I did the soundtrack for this movie called Harry McSally, and I hope it's going to be good. And then the movie blew up and he was freaking out because his music manager was like, we got to get you home. We got to get you on tour. You know, this. And finally he got to go. And when he did, he just literally was on tour for like 2 years after that. You know?
Amazing.
So he's another one I kind of watched go from star to superstar right before my eyes. But, you know, at the time, I mean, that was the movie for a teenage actor to get. Literally that year, everybody wanted that movie. And, you know, they luckily picked me to be part of that ensemble. And that was my big pitch when I came in, was I'd been in a very good ensemble theater company in Los Angeles called the Friends and Artists Theater Ensemble. And was a very celebrated theater. And that was my approach. I came in and I said, you know, ensemble's my forte. I'm in one of the best ensemble companies in Los Angeles. And we just did one of the most difficult ensemble plays called Bomb and Gilead that we just won a bunch of awards for. And the director said that really left an impression because he said that all the actors in LA just wanted to know what was in it for them. And so that was very refreshing. He said, and then he was looking at tapes for different people, and Patrick Dempsey's reel was one of them that he had looked at. And my scene in Can't Buy Me Love, where I throw him against the arcade and the famous quote, "You shit on my house," he saw that scene and he said that scene and that conversation would ice me getting the job. So thank you, Patrick, for having me on your reel.
You see, you've just got such an embarrassment of riches. I forgot you were pinned up against the wall by McSteamy or McDreamy or whichever one of those he is.
Yes, yeah. He's McDreamy, but that's funny.
He's McDreamy,
I really do 6 degrees of separation. McSteamy is an actor I helped train. So when he was young, I didn't even recognize him. He looked so different as an adult. But he was an actor in San Francisco that I actually coached. So
wow. Yeah. Anyone else? I think they would make it up, but I can see it all on your credits here.
Well, yeah, I had a few actors that I trained that broke out to be much bigger than me. Him being one of them. Another one was Alicia Silverstone. So she's done quite good for herself.
Speak about growing up in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, she may have been a teeny bit of a crush of mine when I was growing up.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Oh, yeah. Getting back to you, sir, though. Seinfeld, I realize you're in there as a clerk. It may have been a small role, but come on now. Again, one of those kind of iconic shows.
No, it's. Are you kidding? It's one of the greatest comedies in the history of television, right? I mean, to even have done anything to have been part of that is a badge of honor for sure. A couple things I would like to say about that were number one. I saw when I was in the makeup, I saw a bunch of pictures of Porsches on the wall. And I'm like, oh, my Porsche Speedsters are my favorite cars, though I don't own one. I wish I could afford one. They were like, Jerry Seinfeld, is a huge Porsche guy. I'm like, oh. So I started talking to him, and I told him about, that Speedsters are, my favorite. Next day, come to set, and he's like, hey, come outside. I want to show you something. And he had this beautiful Speedster that he went out of his way to go get because he has a garage where he keeps them. Traded one car he was driving to go get that car to bring it to me. And it was this beautiful blue with this cream interior. And it was one of the most beautiful cars I've ever seen. But he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to go out of his way to show me a car. I thought it was very, very nice of him. It just says something about his character, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you get these people who are kind of rich who kind of collect these cars just to say they've collected them. But if there's someone who kind of goes out, like he seems to just really enjoy it, is what I'm getting at.
Right. Well,
like he doesn't just.
He has a show now, right, where he drives around and interviews people in a car, right, one of his cars. So it's funny that all these years later, the car thing is still very much a part of his DNA. But I just thought it was so nice of him to go out of his way to do that. He didn't have to do that. Another thing that was really unique about him and that show is these shows, these comedies, these half-hour sitcoms are shot live. And so usually they're shot on video. They shot that on film. So you'd have 4 cameras film being shot. So it gave the quality of the show a much, much better quality. Cheers was the first show to do that. But they followed suit. But they also have in the audience, to keep the audience amused, they have a comedian who they call warms up the audience, right? Tells them jokes, keeps them laughing, so they're in a good mood. Well, and I've been to many tapings of shows, and that's what they do. Jerry did that on his show. He's doing the show, but he's also the audience warm up guy, which just takes the audience's enthusiasm to a whole different level, right? I mean, and it just makes it so much more personal that it's Jerry himself doing it,
There's certainly no argument that guy works hard.
Yeah. Oh, and they also had a live band to keep the audience entertained, which I also never saw on another show. So they just really, really did it right,
Yeah. Oh, I think that guy just does life right. He just enjoys himself.
And I've seen him do stand up too. I saw him do a set in Vegas, and man, he's brilliant, man. He's brilliant.
Nice. The other one, like Tales from the Crypt, another one of these shows, which just to get to do an episode of that.
So
how
that happened, which actually Michael DeLuise is in that one, bringing back the DeLuises. How I did that one was directed by Bob Gale, who wrote Back to the Future. And so he remembered me, I guess, and asked me if I would do it, and I was like, sure. So I mean, I would be happy to do a Tales of the Crypt, but it was great to actually have Bob Gale personally reach out to me to do it. So that's how that happened, and that was a pretty fun episode.
Brilliant. And I just hope to God that you had a scene with this next one I'm going to talk about. But this one's The Line of Duty, The Price of Vengeance, with Dean Stockwell in it, the legend. Did you get any time with him?
Did I actually do any scenes with Dean? I certainly remember Dean being on the set. I think a couple, again, trying to remember back, right?
Of course.
How I got I gotta think of the director's name. Oof. It'll come to me in a minute. But how I got on that is I'd done
Dick Lowry.
Dick Lowry, right? His sister is Junie Lowry, which I was trying to remember her name because I knew then I would remember his name. Junie Lowry is a big casting director in LA, and one I respect a lot. I feel like she has, a very good eye. And uh, so I had worked for him once before. I had done he was a big movie of the week director in that time, and I'd worked for him on a thing called American Harvest that we shot actually in Canada, because it was all about like guys working on wheat combines and things. But so he wanted me to do this, and his sister was casting it, and I had not worked for her before, but I'd auditioned for her 1,000 times for NYPD Blue. But I'd never been cast by her, and so I was out of town, and she was kind of ruffled that I wasn't coming in, and so but he kept saying, "No, you got to see this guy, you got to see this guy." So finally, I came into audition, and it was just him and her, and you could see that she was kind of like, "Who do you think? Who do you think you are at this point?" And then I did my thing, and then she just became like the biggest fan, and is always brought me into her office, and has gotten me jobs, but she's tried to get me many jobs. And she's great. And Dick's a really good director, really good with camera. And what was interesting about that project was it was based on a true story about this detective that was trying to crack this case about this murder, and it was this sort of crime group in LA, and the guy on a Halloween day dressed in a clown suit in a limousine and machine gunned down this cop to keep him from getting close to figuring out what they did. And his son saw this real detective get killed in front of him, and the mother and the son were on set, and I played a bad guy, but I still felt an incredible amount of responsibility to do the job right, because it was really based on this family's loss.
Well, and like, what does the responsibility feel like, especially when you're playing the bad guy, because you have to do honor to what happened, but like they're right there when you're performing?
Yeah, they were there a lot. They saw a lot of stuff, and I don't know if they saw that scene where they shot him down, but I hope not, because that would have been just too traumatic in my opinion. But when you play somebody real like a Memphis Belle, or in this case a story about real people, you definitely feel a big responsibility to just get it right. You just want to make sure you do your best work. That's what I feel.
When you're doing that, how do you balance like playing this real life character and getting into their headspace as much as you can, and the part where you have to act and you have to kind of extrapolate? How do you balance those out?
Yeah, they're sort of two there's acting is juggling. It's juggling balls, right? There's a lot of things going on at the same time, multitasking, I guess you could say. But there's sort of ultimately two things. There's this character that if you're doing well, you're thinking like he's thinking, right? That's where you try to get yourself to the point where you're thinking and reacting the way they would be, not the way you would be. And if it's going well, that consumes most of your consciousness. But I sort of call it, there's like sort of me witnessing it in the back, sort of the back of my skull, sort of watching what's going on, because I have to be there enough to be able to know when it's my cue and know where I have to hit my mark, right? I have to be present to these things, or I wouldn't even be making a movie, I guess, right? So, so there's this part of me that's, I almost call it like when I'm at my best, there's the me witnessing this thing that I'm creating, and if it's going really well, the character will do something that surprises me watching, where the me watching goes, "Wow, that was a really interesting choice you just made, a reaction you just had. I would have never intellectually thought to do that." That's when I know I'm at my best.
Oh, I love that. The split personality that you have to kind of put your head into at times.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's more like if I'm doing the character right, it's more like 90 character, 95 character, 5% act, me watching, going, okay, yeah, you have to go to this mark over here, so make sure you get over there, and that's about it. If it's going really well, that's what's happening.
I want to skip ahead a little bit. One of my favorite sitcoms of modern time, which I think was Crime, it only ran for, I believe, 4 seasons, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's My Name is Earl, which you popped up as Lloyd in.
Yeah, I really liked that show as well, and I think I could have gone on much longer. I just remember that when I saw the pilot episode, I was just like, this is such a cool concept for a such a cool message of karma and completing things that need to be completed. They just they don't talk about like stuff like that interesting in a sitcom. So I really loved that premise of this guy having to sort of make amends. So I auditioned for that show for 4 seasons. I went back, and I really just wanted to get on it because I really, really liked it. And then ironically, in the 4th season, I guess, it must have been the 4th season, I got that role, which was by far the best role I had auditioned for, like by far. So I was really glad to get to do it. And what I felt that role, I've played, the nerd, like in a, Can't Buy Me Love, and I've played plenty of crazies and other things, but rarely have I been able to, I've never had done both in a project before. So this guy starts out as this, nerdy, doughy-eyed person, and then turns into this bitter, curmudgeon for being burned by this car thing, So I really got to do a nice big range in that role, and that kind of everything I can do, or not everything I can do, but a lot of what I can do all in one episode. And the other thing that was very cool was that my son was a big fan of the 2 leads, Jason and shit, I can't think of the other guy's name. He's a great guy.
Ethan Suplee.
Ethan, man, Ethan's a really cool dude. I like him a lot. My son went to high school not that far from where we were shooting, so I was able to go grab him after class and run him to set, and he was just tickled to meet these guys. And that's it's hard to impress a teenager. So.
Oh, your son must be a big fan of Mallrats, with the 2 of them in
Mallrats, and also what was that Texas football movie that Ethan was in? The first thing anybody ever saw Ethan in. He was
I'm not aware of that one.
Something Blues.
Harvard Blues?
Yeah, I think so. But he knew him from other things, and so, but he also liked the series. So, but yeah, he was a fan of them for more than one thing, and he just couldn't stop laughing when he came on the set meeting. He just kept looking at them and cracking up, and it was just really funny to see him have such a great reaction. So, like I said, it's hard to impress a teenager. So whenever I get a chance to, I tried to make the best of it.
One thing which we mentioned before, Hell's Kitty, which just fantastic title and premise for a film, if you ask me. I love the fact that horror can do so many weird and wonderful things and go to so many weird premises.
Yes.
With all the different kind of work in horror amongst other genres that you've done, what's the kind of weirdest thing that you've had to do?
In horror? The weirdest thing I've ever had to do in horror? Is that the question?
You can go anywhere, but like horror seems like one which would lend itself.
That's true. Nothing's popping in my head right now. Let's go on to the next thing. I'm sure something will come to me. Let's see if I come up with a good idea. Because weirdest thing I've ever had to do. That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay, we'll return back to that one. But one thing which we have to get onto, of course, is your new movie, Queen Bees. Tell us a bit about it and the fantastic cast. This is just one of these wonderful, like we've seen it happen with a lot of male casts, I feel like, but this is a female cast in a retirement home, learning to grow old disgracefully. But tell us a bit about it in your own words. Sir.
Yeah. So I just do a cameo in it, but I was totally pleased to see that made the trailer, which was a surprise. It's nice to know there's one of the funnier bits in the movie, as you say. But yeah, I was Michael Lembeck, the director. I'd done a comedy class with him and his sister Helene for years called the Harvey Lembeck Comedy Workshop. Their father taught it in the 60s and 70s and even early 80s, and they've carried it on. But Michael's directed many sitcoms and many movies. But when I realized I was going to have the chance to work with Ellen Bernstein, Anne Margaret, Laura Devine, and Jane Curtin, I was like, I'm in. So
yeah.
That was what that was all about. And what was great was my character, before he steals the purse in this coffee house, they have this sort of dialogue scene before that's where my character is watching him. So I just get to watch these 4 actresses work all day before it was sort of my turn to do my thing. And that was just a great experience because they all have their special gifts, like Jane Curtin, her comedic timing, is just it is what it is, right? It's, it's unmistakably, it's just, you're like, that's what comedic timing is. I wish I had that like that, but you're watching Ellen Bernstein. She's a total method New York actress. And you see her, conjuring up something she needs to, see her character has to start the scene laughing. You'll see her find something in her to make her laugh before she starts the scene. You see their different ways of methods of working. It was very, very interesting.
So you've been, as I say, in over 130 productions, 134 as an actor. What do you owe kind of working so much, and how do you keep up that amazing work ethic to kind of go from production to production?
First, I'll go back to answering your question. The weirdest thing I had to came to me now. So
Yeah,
I did a video game called LA Noir, which was a pretty cool game set like LA 1940s, which my son actually also loved that. So that was cool that I got to do something. That was a bizarre experience. And you had to do, be in those green, all green suits with the bubbles all around you, the bubble suits they're called, because it's a video game, right? So first you do that, which is weird. And then before you start and when you end, you have to do like what's called a T. You have to put your arms out, and then you have to be in a shape of a T. So you have to start the scene in a T, and then when you end, you have to. They always yell at me, "Go back to your T, T, T." I'm like, because I'd always forget, because it's like I'm not thinking about being being in this position of a T at the end. I'm trying to act. So you do all that, and then 2 months later we came back, because that's all for the body movements of the scene, basically, even though you're doing all the dialogue. Then we came back and we go into this all white room with like literally 50 cameras all around you, 360 degrees, and they're just shooting your head. And you would have to start each thing making all these facial expressions: smile, frown, look mad, da, da, da. And then you would do each line you had one by one, just one line at a time. And beyond that, that was strange, was you had to go get your hair basically pressed into like a helmet, like they'd spray it and flatten it and spray it and flatten it so that no light was coming through, because they were going to put your head on your body, like a green screen thing. You get what I'm saying? It was the first video game to actually have facial recognition.
Wow.
And it was weird. It was a weird way to do something, but boy did it come out good. It looked fantastic.
I just love any project where you get the direction T, go back into your T.
Yes. And then just to have to, before you're doing one line, it's hard to get in a flow of anything. You're doing one line. And before that, every time you'd have to make all your facial recognitions, all your expressions that you could conjure up. I mean, it was strange, but they had never done anything like that before. It took them 5 years, I think, or 3 to 4 years to make that project.
Wow.
So and that was that was the craziest thing I think I've ever done. So back to
that's a good one.
The question of longevity, right? I think.
Yes, please.
Well, I would say a couple of things. One, I would say, as a character actor, I think you can continue to as long as if you have an interesting face, I think you can continue to work, right? I think you continue to grow old and still look interesting, as it were. So I have that going for me, I believe. Number two is that, a lot of the people that were in my acting class when I was young, once they started working, they stopped studying. And I think that was their critical error. I never did. I stayed in the first class I was in. I stayed in for a decade. That class we were in. Even when I wasn't working, I was always in that class. And then after that, I continued to study other classes. That's why I say I know all the methods, because I've studied Meisner. I've studied Stanislavski. I've always kept myself in a class. And if I wasn't in a class, I taught for a number of years. And then in the end, I was doing that Harvey Lembeck comedy workshop, which was honestly very difficult. It was improv, situational improv, not what I'm used to. Creating characters very fast. I'd fall on my face in there a lot. And for an actor who's as established as I am, that was humiliating. But that's why you go back, right? If you're not willing to fall on your face, if you're not willing to grow, if you're not willing to continue to get better, I think, you're getting stagnant. So I think that my willingness to have kept working at the craft that whole time, I think is is the other aspect of the longevity. And then the third thing I would say is an ability to look at who are you now? What do you look like now? And what is the market for your age demographic now? And
Right.
figuring out how to work within that. And an example of that would be when I was after my teen, cinema run of the 80s. What I was faced with as an actor was there was no 20 something roles at that time. There is now, but there wasn't then in the early 90s. There just really wasn't. You were either like in college or you were 30 something. Matter of fact, there was a show at that time called 30 something, right? So I had to look myself in the mirror and go, what am I going to do? Like, I don't look 30. How am I going to make this work? And I was like, well, what can you do that's roughly that age? I said, bad guys. I can pull off bad guys. So I grew my hair out long, combed it back, grew a goatee, and I could kind of start to edge to that 30-year-old or late 20s. And I just focused on I'm going to play bad guys. And for the decade of the 90s, that's what I did. If you look at a lot of TV credits, and I just played Mad Dogs, and then I felt like that had run its course. And I was looking like long-haired guys. It was like all that was available, sort of like crackheads. I'm like, that's not what I want to do. So I knew my team wouldn't go for it because that was the easy, low-hanging fruit playing bad guys. I just shaved all my hair off. They didn't ask them. I shaved my head, took pictures, came back, and they were like flipped out. They didn't want to hear it. And I said, well, I'm not doing bad guys. I'm done. I'm burned out on it. I can do comedy. Look at my, previous, look at my 80s. And they kept sending me bad guys, and I kept saying no. I sat out for like a year, and I went in for an audition for a Sean Penn movie called Sam, I Am Sam, and I didn't get that. And they said the reason I didn't was because I was too recognizable for his friends, but they really liked this new look with the short hair. They were the ones that called me in for Sweet Home Alabama for the sheriff. Not my managers wouldn't have submitted me.
Right.
My agents they brought me in, and I got the job. And of course, that changed people's perceptions again, because now this was a big theatrical release comedy that did very well. I think at the time it was the #1 grossing February film, so that was a big boost to my career, and my management and agents were still not getting it. So I had to let them go, and got people who could see where I was now, not where I was, 10 years ago. And you have to keep doing that. You have to keep reinventing yourself. Where am I now, and what are the roles available now, and what can I do in those roles that are available now? And you got to figure it out.
And it's so smart as well, because there's so many actors who curse the darkness of being typecast, but you lit the candle of putting yourself into a new space.
Yeah. It's all how you look at it, right? I mean, we're all facing typecasting. I think the bigger star you are, in some ways, the more typecasting. They're like, well, this is the type of movie you're in that makes movies. This is the type of movie we will pay you to do. So we all struggle with that as actors, but at times you can definitely see what your market is, and you need to know your market. And if that's a form of typecasting, then maybe it is. But you can there's still lots of having played bad guys for that time. I mean, it wasn't just the same guy every time, like TV as guest stars have offered me some of the most challenging roles I've ever done. One of the ones in the 90s that really stood out was I did an episode of Diagnosis Murder.
Yes.
And I played a character who was paralyzed on one side, pretending to have cerebral palsy on the other. And he had been this guy who ended up becoming a pro basketball player. He had hurt this guy to the point where he was paralyzed. So he felt he cost him his basketball career. And so he pretends he works there as the lackey on the team, and he poisons him. And he comes out of that in the the interview at the end, the big interview always in these court dramas. He comes out of the faking of the cerebral palsy and admits what he had done. And I had a week to prepare that, less than a week. That's this was pre-internet. You couldn't even see what I had to remember what I felt cerebral palsy was, and then did research on it, but I couldn't look at it. But to pull something like that off, I was proud of my ability as an actor to do that. I feel when you have auditions like that, you separate the men from the boys, as it were. Who has the chops and who doesn't.
And I've got to give you the credit for kind of all that research gone into that kind of tricky of kind of setups, because man, was Diagnosis Murder convoluted when it wanted to be.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I was also warned as I'm trying to prepare for my big scene that Dick Van Dyke would be telling jokes and singing show tunes and not really be respectful of that process. And I was thankful somebody gave me that warning, because he in fact did do all of that, and it was very distracting. And when I got to yell in his face, I enjoyed every minute of it.
It's not going to get a better out than that. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
As we're going out on the radio, so this goes first of all out live as it is now, and then it goes on our radio show a bit later on in the week. Usually I would ask my guest to pick a track they want to hear on the radio, but considering you have a new album out, which one of your tracks should we play?
Wow. I think I would say let's do the one from the Ripple Street Band, Would You. It's a very heavy song and it's an interesting topic. I like it. Let's go with that.
So the Ripple Street Band.
Yeah, which I sing in this. So I sing in that band. So, and if you
listen. Sorry,
if you don't if you don't like that, that's just too heavy. The other song would be the one from my Acoustic Gains record called "There Was a Time."
So look,
or you can go with
I've got 2 hours on the radio to fill up. We're going for a double play. Here's over to a double bill of Courtney Gains. Of course, here on the video, we just sat here like fools after I've just waved my hands in the air. But we will never mind that now. Courtney, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You're one of the people I get to speak to, and I literally get to thank for making my childhood through movies better. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Pleasure meeting you, and definitely send the show. I'll post it up on my Facebook and stuff.
Done and done. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much to you for watching. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. And guys, in a world where you can be literally anything, please be kind. I've been Dr. Squee, and that was my show.